How
Good
are
morning.
you?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good.
Good.
We're early birds.
We are.
Yeah.
Because last week I thought I was late. So
I was late last week, so that was it. How are you enjoying the class?
very much. Very much.
I'm enjoying meeting people, and some of the ladies who are joining are just magnificent. They're really wonderful.
yeah.
I specifically was touched by the concept of creating your own ritual.
Yep.
And I really had to ponder on that one. How does one do that? And the concept of prayer. So I found that fascinating. Been working on that issue for myself.
Good for you. Good for you. Yeah. No, rituals are very private and very good for us to determine ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And how do you encompass the concepts that we're trying to develop at this point into a ritual? Good
Just
lesson.
do it all the time. A ritual is something that you repeat.
A
Good morning,
habit.
Alice.
Good morning.
How is your darling husband doing, Donald? You're muted.
There we go. He's doing great. Went to the surgeon last Friday for a 6-week checkup, and he said, you can do anything that you want, just don't fall. That's
Right.
the advice. And isn't that true for all of us? But
Of course it is. No, it
but
really
yeah,
is.
I mean, he's back to walking 3-4 miles. He was out, pruning the fig tree. He's doing everything that he used to do. And of course he's cooking. So that made me happy. But he started that, a week after the surgery. He was back in the kitchen.
That's so wonderful.
Yeah.
Does he give you a shopping list or he shops too?
We usually shop together, or
Nice.
or he'll go if he has something in mind. And he can open the refrigerator and just make something happen. So
You are such a lucky woman.
I am, except it's not good for trying to lose
Weight
the weight.
Right.
While we were in the healing process, we sat around a lot, and I didn't want to leave. So it wasn't like I would go out and, go for a walk or take the dogs or anything. So I put on about 5 pounds over the 3 months that was all going on. So now I have to shape up, because it doesn't make me happy.
You're good. You shape up.
I will.
You will.
It is important. Josh did not send any.
No, I don't think he is going to.
Okay.
I have a feeling. I
Yeah.
mean, we can ask him, but that was
Right.
the feeling
Because
I got.
I went back to the first email that had all the classes listed and connected there.
Right. I think that's what we're supposed to do.
Okay, that's fine. That's
Yeah,
fine.
I
You
think so
feeling good?
too. I think so too. And I think you can now, if you have to check under AJRCA.
Right, that was what I did. But when I didn't see anything, I went back to what I'd flagged from original, and it clicked right on. So
Exactly.
We're creatures of our own habits.
I'm so happy to meet you all. I chair the board of the Academy for Jewish Religion, and we're so excited to have Joshua as our president. And so
he's so incredible.
You need vitamin
Yeah.
C.
You really
Oh, incredible. I'm changing all
Yes.
of your names because you're all called Andrew Schulman. Did you guys see that?
Yeah, why are
What?
they all called Andrew Schulman?
Not anymore. I just changed you.
not anymore, whoever that
Everything.
was. We were just singing your praises, Josh.
Oh,
and
yeah.
telling
Thank
Marlene
you
how
so much.
fortunate she is to have you.
Oh, that's so
Aw.
sweet. I
And
want to tell you,
I
like,
was saying how fortunate we are to be able to have all of them share with us now.
look at, I have a TV, which maybe I'm going to get set up, but look at this. Do you see this over here? Marlene, I thought you'd like that.
Oh yeah, I see it. Oh, I love
Yeah.
it.
So now look, right? It's almost complete.
Beautiful.
We're getting there. I have to figure out what to do with that shelving, people. So you all get to have input into what I do with that stuff. So
Where's
important.
decorating committee?
Right.
Yeah, right. And it's all because you guys, you have the best vantage point, because you're looking at this is how I've got it set up here. So,
Well, yeah, unfortunately, the way you have it set up is the main thing we see are those things. You know what we're talking about? Josh and I are talking about those silver like things that go between the shelves.
Does that look better?
Perfect. Now it's much better.
No, that's no good. Okay. Ah. Hello, another Andrew Schulman. Are you Vicky? Are you Vicky? Hi, Vicky.
Hi there. Oops, why am I Andrew Schulman?
Hi,
Not
Vicky.
anymore. I hope I'm spelling your name correctly. Did I spell it correctly?
There you go. Yes, you did. That's perfect.
Okay.
Thank
Here
you.
comes another Andrew Schulman. I wonder what happened.
I don't know, but it's pretty funny.
Vicky, is Maureen coming? Oh, there's Maureen.
Maureen's on.
Yeah, I see her.
Yeah, I'm listed as Andrew Schulman too.
Me too.
Well,
We're all Andrew Schumann.
I know.
Who is Andrew Schulman?
Who is and where is he?
It doesn't matter. It's like he's like every man.
He happens to be my son-in-law, just to give you the secret.
Oh, really?
Oh,
Yeah,
He's a
but
placeholder.
he also does marketing for us, and so
Oh, okay.
How's that? Audrey, did I get you?
It's close, except Sherwin is spelled Sherwyn.
okay.
Oh, wait.
Judy's
say it again?
Andrew Schulman too.
And you have to fix Judy.
Yeah,
All
Judy's.
right, I'm gonna
Andrew
fix
Schulman.
everybody. Well, you guys fix yourselves, people.
Fix
SAT.
yourselves. How do you fix yourself?
I don't even know how we got there.
Like that? Audrey, is
No,
that good?
Sherwyn.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
How's that
thanks.
look?
Yeah, it's fine. I actually go by Cohen Sherwin, but it doesn't really matter.
Oh
I mean,
my
God,
is that
see,
gonna be
now
my
you're-
permanent? Is that
No, I'm
gonna
gonna-
be on my screen now? Like when
For
I log
today.
into things?
For today? No,
Just for today. But when I log
Yeah.
into my next Zoom, it'll come up correctly?
I hope so. I have no idea why it's coming up this way.
Okay.
But
I
these
see
are things,
somebody
look,
else.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
you know
Perfect.
what?
I
All
see
right, so-
somebody else has my, I see. Karen Gordon has mine. Do you see another Marlene Cantor? Her name is Karen Gordon.
Hi, Karen. Nice to meet you. If you'd like, we'll change everybody's names, but, and if you want, you could do this yourself. So in your, if you go into like, you draw your mouse over to your window, there's 3 little dots in your
Mhm.
window, and you should be able to pull that down. And if you look down in the list, it shows you, one of the possible choices is rename. And you put yourself there and you rename yourself as however you like, right? So I have my email, I should, because that's what popped up without any changing. So I can correct that at another point. But you know what? Let's come and learn together. It's so great to see you. This is an excellent opportunity to begin to understand the power of ritual. Because for those who are new to the class, the students that we've been learning together for quite some time, we have a ritual. The ritual that we have is that as we learn, we also offer a prayer of healing. And the reason we offer a prayer of healing is because sometimes the members of our class or the loved ones of the members of our class are in need of healing. And often, as it's been so precarious in the past couple of years, we've really taken the time to talk about some of the more really challenging and difficult new elements of the news or sort of happenings in the world that are causing us all distress. And whether it's the sort of conflict in Ukraine or the terrible shooting in Uvalde, or it's so sad for us to begin our class being so mindful of the terrible shooting in Monterey Park and now in San Mateo County, and the unbelievable natural disasters that just happened a couple weeks ago. So the world is aflame, and we talk about that. The world is aflame with all kinds of conflict, and this is a sanctuary for us for learning. And it's an opportunity not only in a sanctuary to find some respite from the challenges that exist in the world, but it is a place for us to reconnect and also be inspired to go out into the world and bring healing wherever it's necessary. So this is a very important thing that we do. We have a custom and a way that we'll do it, and I will add the language. Today, for those who are familiar, we have a prayer that we sing, It's called it's called by the first couple words. It's called Misha Berach, which in Hebrew means may the one who blesses, and it's about a blessing of our ancestors. And for those who are familiar, you'll sing it, I'll sing it, and you'll see it, and I'll invite you into the practice of the ritual. But typically what we've done, and we won't be able to do that because of our time in the class, is we've had everyone kind of go around and share a specific thought. And what I want to invite you to do is, if you have a particular prayer for someone in your circle who is in need of healing, whether it's an individual or whether you just want to add a prayer for someone in the world that you think needs it, please go ahead and put that into the chat. And that way we'll be able to kind of collectively witness all of the care and concern that we share in the world, and then we'll take our prayers and we'll be inspired by them, because we'll see not only that this is a circle of serious and caring and loving people, but it's also a community of learners who take the wisdom that we share together and bring that wisdom to the world that so desperately needs it. The wisdom is probably going to be the most powerful tool that we can to use to combat against sometimes the injustices and the pain and the suffering that we exist in the world. So we'll begin with this. We have a way of saying the blessing. I'll also put this all up next week, and thank you for your understanding as we just go through it and you experience it today, and next time I'll teach it to you all. So for some reason, let me see if I can get this to mute everybody, because that's the one thing about Zoom is that it is, there we go, it is latent in sound. Okay. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kichanu b'mitzvotav v'tivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Misheberach avotenu mekor habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. We add our prayers for all those who have listed into the chat, and our prayers to the families who are suffering through the recent losses and the tragedies in Monterey Park and San Mateo, and hope that our collective prayers bring healing to all in need. Misheberach imotenu mekor habracha le'avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. We also conclude by saying refuah shlema, and we'll all learn this. Refuah means healing, shlema means complete. Complete healing and recovery to all in need. So thank you, and it's wonderful to gather together. So good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, because I think, Roberta, you're on the East Coast, yes? And so it's good. So it still looks sunny out there, which is very nice. And I hope that you all really enjoyed last week's learning together. We welcome some new friends to the class. So if you need any of the texts or the recordings from the last class, you should be able to receive them from our office, and just let me know directly if you don't have that. The one thing that I want to carry from last class into this class, and then also to speak about what we're going to be discussing in this class and in the following class, is first of all, the concept of ritual as a demonstration of the heroic. And that was really sort of the takeaway from one of the teachings that we had from Rabbi Shimon Felix, talking about what ritual is all about. And the concept that ritual is a demonstration, it's a heroic demonstration. It's an affirmation of life against what seems to be the kind of impulsive or natural reaction to the world. Concept that we stop, we take notice, and we recognize that something significant is taking place. That is nothing short of what we would call heroic. Now, in America, when we think about heroes, we have a fantasy in America. Heroes are like, look, we have the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we have Superman, we have all of these things, which parenthetically was a creation in the comic book universe by Jewish creative thinkers. But the concept of the heroic is well understood and well practiced from philosophers and theologians throughout the generations. And in America, we have a fascination with it. Just look in the movie theater, and when you go to the movies, more often than not, you're gonna hear the heroic story, the hero's journey, some kind of triumphant overcoming of adversity. That's what we like. It's entertaining to us. It's impactful to us. We identify with it. Now, I'm not a big fan of European film, but I have a feeling that it is not obsessed with heroism as much, or Asian, or any other kind of cultural demonstration of its art. There are heroic stories, but like for me, my very like biased and very stereotypical understanding of perhaps French literature is very existential. It's just sort of a dilemma with the quandaries of existence. And it's like sort of how people make decisions in a world that seems so nihilistic. But here, it's this actually dogged belief in America that we are obsessed about, that what we do makes a difference. And it's the power of a ritual that says what we do makes a difference. So if that is the sort of foundation of what ritual is, then we can layer into what Judaism brings to the conversation for ritual. And the reason why we want to do that is not only because this is sort of a demonstration of our traditions, expressions of what are rituals, but we also kind of set the standard. And you're going to learn that as we study today's text. And here's what I want to be sure in our brief learning together. What we're going to be learning today is more about the what rituals we're discussing. So when we're talking about this, you may be tempted to add a contribution to the conversation and say, like, we're talking about a brit milah or a bris. You'd be like, I went to a bris and they served brisket. And he would say brisket at a bris. And if you don't know what I'm saying, you will in a second. Sounds disgusting, but like if somebody said I went to it, and you would say, I went to a Jewish ritual and they did this and I liked it. Maybe in some respects, it was even better than what you are teaching us is what the history and the meaning of the ritual is. I want you to hold that thought for today, because that is really what our second class in this series will be about. Today is about the what, and it's not only the sort of historical underpinnings of it, but a little bit about the practice and function of what are the rituals that define. Today's subject is about the beginning of life, welcoming a child into the covenant of the Jewish religion, but also what it means to welcome a life into a circle of family, a community. And then the second one is not only that we will sort of add the layers of our present experience, but there are many things that we experience today that are completely novel. There are, as we'll learn in next week's class, there are novelty of like ceremonies that welcome a child into the covenant without gender conformity, because there is a growing understanding that parents don't want to layer on any kind of distinction of what gender their child will be, even from the moments of birth. So we have rituals that have degendered, I suppose, the language that would be used to describe the particular ritual. And then our question in the second course is not only like, is this the present and what people are doing, but really for us to ask the questions of what do we anticipate, or what do we think we need to make our rituals meaningful for today and tomorrow's generation? So hold those impulses of those questions for next week and just ask about the what's. So if you have any question of like, I didn't know what this was about. I didn't know what this was from. Could you explain how this had to be? That's what today is all about. Any questions about that? Wonderful. Okay. So, and myself, I'm going to try to make sure that when we do the recording, everybody gets to see who is ever speaking. But let me share with you our text for today. A second. Good. So let me just sort of clarify in the chat. Yes, I will do my best to share the text before the class. So if you can print it out for those who like it. And I just have, in our adjustment, trying to figure out what works best for us. So I'm thrilled to send you the text link before class. But let me do this. Speaking of the text, let me, if you really want to print it out while we're in the middle of class, I can make this available to us. So let me do this. Okay. Go. Wonderful. Isn't it amazing what we can do with technology so fast? But you guys are also watching it. This used to be like, stuff that happened in secret behind a closed wall. Today, we're going to be talking about beginning rituals. So particularly, we'll be talking about the Brit Milah ceremony and the ceremony for naming a daughter and its history. And I love it. If we get to it, we'll talk about a couple of other beginning ceremonies, but this is just a way for us to study about the two primary welcoming a child into the world and into the covenant rituals. So this is from Rick Moranis. You guys know who Rick Moranis is, right? Remember, like Parenthood and what was Spaceballs, right? Like, he's a very, very prominent Jewish character on the big screen. So he decided to go off on his own way and be like a comedian, which I didn't know that he was, or a satirist. And this is a little quote. So Alice, I've got you up in my corner. I think I asked you last week, but since you're my first on the screen, don't ever think that I pick favorites. I love you all.
Okay. There's a song called Live Blogging the Himmel Family Bris. I kind of went for it here in terms of, it was really fun to be explaining ritual circumcision in Nashville. A lot of brisses are done in hospitals, but many are done in people's homes, and there's a lot of food and a lot of leftovers.
Thank you
Shall I
very much.
continue?
That's yes. So hold on for a second before you continue, right? So here's the sort of like tongue in cheek. There are, look, I'm a rabbi, so there's a couple like repertoires of jokes that you need, and I have quite a repertoire of jokes around the bris circumcision ceremony, and I won't go into them now, but if you ever want some of them, I take tips. But whatever it is that you want for those, that we can always make fun of them. That's kind of like part of the Jewish attitude and mentality around every single thing Jewish, but particularly our rituals. So it's not just that there's something that is somber and sobering about this, but it's actually a joyful moment, and it even deserves a little bit of play with it. So what I'd like to do, so go ahead, you want to read, is the first thing is, these are the text origins. Why do we undergo a circumcision ritual? It is because the command to circumcise our children is first found in the book of Genesis. So please read.
The history of circumcision. I will maintain my covenant between me and you and your offspring to come as an everlasting covenant throughout the ages, to be God to you and to your offspring to come. You shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and that shall be the sign of the covenant between me and you. And throughout the generations, every male among you shall be circumcised at the age of 8 days. Thus shall my covenant be marked in your flesh as an everlasting pact. And if any male who is uncircumcised fails to circumcise the flesh of his foreskin, that person shall be cut off from kin. He has broken my covenant.
Okay. So it's actually really great to begin with the text. So let's just kind of like construct together. What do we think is the reason that that we have circumcision in the Jewish tradition, and really, like, from a negative sense, what are the consequences, right? Like, so what's at stake here? Anybody want to jump in? What's at stake here with circumcision? Let's go for it.
Well, I think that the intent was to identify and separate all Jewish males. And on the negative side of that, it identifies and separates all Jewish males.
Right.
So
Right.
that's a rock and a hard place.
So on the one hand, you have this like distinction. It's a distinction between us and them. Okay, so that's the ritual. Sue.
I have a question because it doesn't mention women. Does that mean that women don't have a covenant with God?
So great question. And as we're familiar, the Jewish tradition does not have a ritual of female circumcision. There are some African cultures that do. It's called genital mutilation at that point, right? Where they do a little bit of skin removal from the clitoral hood, and it fundamentally damages the nerve endings in the clitoris, and it actually ends up harming the sort of, you know, not only the pleasure potential for women, but also sort of like in some capacity identity. And so there's, you know, it's a well-studied thing. Judaism does not have a physical marking for its women, and so therefore the covenantal moment is different. And we'll talk a little bit about it today, but it's really important to point out that right now the primary concern is all about male children. Maybe because it's the most demonstrable, I don't know, right? But I mean, I do have some thoughts about it. The other thing that we're going to discover in a minute is that Jews weren't the first people to circumcise their kids. Okay, so just know that this wasn't something that was exclusively Jewish before it became a Jewish ritual. Judy.
Another consequence is that it can maim someone or cause infection.
Yes, that's a really great thing, right? So another really important point that Judy brings up is that why circumcision exists is because it's hygienic. And that's actually really interesting because that becomes a major argument when the Greeks come on the stage, and particularly Philo of Alexandria, who's about 2100 years old. And Philo of Alexandria is writing and basically saying circumcision was good because it prevented certain kinds of diseases that were endemic to unclean penises. Right. So, and I hope you guys don't mind me just being clinical about it. But that's sort of the what we're dealing with here. Okay. So one thing to consider here is, and it's not written, Judy, it's not written in this text at all that it was done to be hygienic, right? That was purely speculation that we reread into the text, right? Right now it just says you should do it. It doesn't even really give you a sense of why, does it? It just says do it, right? And if anything, the best answer we have is the one that Alice has, which is it's an us and them. Good thing it's us and them, bad things it's us and them. Amanda, you prefer Amanda?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I mean, I heard Judy say something else that it can also cause harm. And I think, again, like you said, to invite some of the repercussions that are nowadays being the reason why parents are questioning this ritual is, does it traumatize the baby or the mother?
That's a great question. Good. So another layer, right? Which I would say let's reserve the deeper thinking about that for next week's class, because you brought up, I mean, I think it's well over 50% of circumcisions that happen today are in the hospital. And I'm not sure exactly on the number in I think that it's about 50%, which is remarkable. That's a remarkable thing. This used to be exclusively something that was done in a ritualistic sense, and now here we are in the 21st century, and it's potentially 50%. That changes the story, and one of the rationales behind it is because of pain or harm that might be caused in the act of circumcising the newborn child. Okay, so we can go with that. Anything else? I'll tell you one other hygienic thing that you should know. Hold on a second, Sue. One thing you should know is why the 8th day? right? Any guesses about why the 8th day? Does anybody know why it is? It's actually a specific reason that that happened. There's two reasons for them. One's sort of spiritual and one's very practical. Any guesses? So the one is, so why 8, right? So what does 8 constitute? 8 constitutes full week of life and the beginning of the second week. Okay, so you could say spiritually, if the child, remember, infant mortality rates were extremely low in recent centuries, and so so it was kind of almost like a bit of a miracle if a child made it past the first week, and now because infant mortality is so high, meaning like so many children are surviving to the tune of 90% or more. The sort of like precariousness that that attends that 8th day is a little bit diminished. Like the chances are that a child is going to survive, but that goes into the clinical aspect. Anybody know what happens on the 8th day biologically? Any of my nurses here? Who knows what happens on the 8th day? Okay.
Milk come out? Does the
What
milk
is it, Tracy?
properly come out? I'm sorry, does the milk properly come out from the mother's breast? That's earlier.
No,
The
that's
umbilical cord?
earlier. What's that?
The umbilical
Sherry, what do you
cord?
know?
The
Nope.
umbilical cord comes off? Nope.
No,
Okay.
that's an interesting one too. Ready? Vitamin K. Vitamin K. The body naturally produces vitamin K on the 8th day, more or less, right? So, and they've done all of the testing of this. You know what they do now? And this happened when my son was born, who's now almost 19. So it's been a while, but I imagine that they're still doing this. As soon as he's born, as soon as my child is born, they give him a bunch of shots. And the first shot that they give the kid is vitamin K. What is vitamin K? It is the vitamin that the body needs in order to clot blood. So what's happening in circumcision? There's a little bit of blood that is going to be drawn. And the body needs to be sure that it can heal itself. And when can it heal itself? Beginning on the 8th day, presuming that everything is away, right? Practical is that, right? I like the spiritual answer. Sherry?
Does it count as a covenant if you have it done in the hospital?
Great question. The answer is no, unless the blessings are done in the hospital. So there are lots and lots of sort of caveats to that, and I would like to reserve that. I'm going to write it down and make sure that I deal with it next class, only because it's going to play into sort of like how we deal with it in modernity, right? So remember, at the time of Abraham, there wasn't such a thing as a hospital. Okay, so just hold on to that. Yes, very quickly, Judy, and then let's go. And Judy Groner, and then Judy Solomon.
So on the 8th day, a male child is then drawn into the covenant, into God and into the Jewish community. So those first 7 days, is that child considered Jewish? If the child passes prior to 8 days, what is the take on what is the religion of that uncircumcised male?
Fantastic. That's exactly it, right? And there's a wonderful, so there are the layers of spirituality here, or especially in the mystical tradition, is that a child does not truly receive his soul until he has been circumcised. Meaning that even though a child is born to Jewish parents, his soul doesn't really enter the body until he's given a Hebrew name and he goes through the process of circumcision. Right? That's the same thing for a Jewish girl. Like the child doesn't receive their soul until they've been given a name. But of course, right, here's what happens, because look, miscarriages and sort of stillborn pregnancies, stillborn births, and children that are born but die in the first days of birth. It happens. So are they treated as Jewish children? Of course, because the parent is Jewish. So biologically, one's identity isn't defined by the naming aspect per se, but by the sort of genealogical connection. So it's a great question. Judy Solomon, did you have one more point?
The 8 days could also be giving the mother a chance to heal before the circumcision. And also, it's a pretty well-known fact that circumcisions done in the hospital can be more dangerous than by a trained mohel who does it all the time. So
That was such an interesting point, and thank you again. Save it. You want to talk about next week, but that is such an important point because that's actually, there's data that's coming out. The most dangerous person to circumcise your baby is the pediatrician, which is the scariest thought altogether. Why? Because it's what they're supposed to do. Anyways, all right. So let's move on. Judy Garner, would you like to read a little bit? You may have to unmute. Oh, there you go. Cool.
Okay. It seems that Abraham did not start the practice of circumcision. Rabbinic legend suggests that it was known before. However, circumcision became firmly established among the Hebrews. When Jacob's daughter Dinah was seduced by the Hivite prince Shechem, and the question of marriage arose, the sons of Jacob insisted that the Hivites?
Yeah.
Undergo the rite. When Moses failed to circumcise his own son, the fault was repaired by Zipporah, his wife, who declared, "Surely a bridegroom of blood art thou to me." The Hebrew term translated as bridegroom is connected with the Arabic for to circumcise. Circumcision was not merely a religious practice, it also took on a national character. Only circumcised males could partake of the paschal sacrifice. The paschal sacrifice. Before the Israelites entered Canaan, they were circumcised by Joshua, the rite having been omitted in the wilderness owing to the hazards of the journey.
Hold on just a moment. Hold on just a moment. So let me pull it off just so we're clear, right? So the first thing that you should see, hello. Why is this not? There we go. Okay. So the first thing you should notice is that one, it says that circumcision isn't sui generis. It isn't new to Judaism. It was probably a fairly common practice, maybe based on some of the things that we discovered before, right? Like somebody said, "Hey, I've got all this infection going on. Well, what if I just take this part of the skin off? I could actually like not get infected and sort of keep this part of my body, let alone all of the sort of responsibilities that come along with it." So there's that. But then there's a second thing that we have examples throughout the Bible about what circumcision represents. So one, you have the story of Jacob when his sons come back to the land of Canaan, and Jacob's daughter Dinah, is taken by Shechem, and he's effectively raped by her. And they say, "You're not allowed to do that to our sister. You have to actually become one of us." So what happens is back into the us and them. So you guys are uncircumcised, but you wanted to be, you want to be in a relationship with one of ours. Well, you need to circumcise yourself. So they circumcise all themselves. And if you know the story, Jacob's sons go in to the camp while they're all recovering because, they're adult people. It's not an easy recovery from a surgical procedure at that stage in life. And they go in and they kill all of them, which is a terrible story. And they do it because they have a sense of vengeance behind it. So it takes on a national characteristic that says, we're circumcised and you're not. If you want to be a part of us, you have to have this kind of marking. It's almost in a way like getting an ear piercing or a tattoo or something. It is a ritual that defines your identity. And then even more so, it says later on in the book of Exodus, it says people who are not circumcised are not allowed to eat that very special sacrifice for Passover, which enables them to be counted among the people of Israel. So this ritual is building up layers of national identity. It's important to understand that. It says, why do people do it and why don't people do it? Part of it in its origins to say is that if you don't do it, you get cut off from the people. If you don't do it, then you aren't allowed to sort of be in relationship with our women and raise children in our community. And there's even this other element, which is kind of like a ritual, and it sometimes has a yicky factor, right? That's a technical term, by the way. And the yicky factor is this concept that we are more hygienically pure than you. And because we have a certain level of purity, we are therefore superior. that is also a complication of this ritual in and of itself. Now, when you go to a bris, nobody's talking about this because this is the least spiritual understanding of what this moment is all about, right? But there's a reality behind it. There's a reality of why this moment is happening. And what Amanda brought up and we have to talk about next week is some of our younger generation who are bringing children to the world aren't necessarily on board with that. Okay, any other comments, questions, or can we keep on going? And Judy, why don't you finish the rest of the reading? I'll bring it back up onto the screen.
Can I
Okay.
just ask a quick question?
Yes.
A
Sure,
clarification,
Tracy.
and just from the what perspective? In terms of modern orthodoxy, I was raised reform, in a reform synagogue. In terms of modern orthodoxy, what are the limitations being put on to people who are deciding not to circumcise their sons for the trauma reasons or for any other reasons that they're deciding not to do that?
So it's a great question. The short answer is that if someone does not go through the ritual circumcision process, they were maybe circumcised by a urologist in the hospital, right, without any prayers. So from an Orthodox perspective, that person, because they're born of Jewish parents, they would undergo a ritual that would enable them to be considered Jewish. And there's a lot of sort of historical examples of how that came to be. So somebody who converts to Judaism is kind of at the same place. It's not quite a conversion, but it's a similar sort of like affirmation of Jewish identity. That's the kind of way that it would be framed in the most positive way. Judy, why don't you finish up with what that rest of the teaching says?
In Hellenistic times, Jews encountered the mockery of Gentiles who believed circumcision to be an unnecessary and unseemly mutilation, and circumcision was widely neglected. Many Jews who wanted to participate nude in the Greek games in the gymnasia underwent painful operations to obliterate the signs of circumcision. The first definite prohibition against circumcision was enacted under Antiochus Epiphanes. Many mothers who had their sons circumcised suffered martyrdom.
Okay, thank you very much, right? So the last piece of this is that it's kind of like what Alice had mentioned before, right? There's an us and them that's good, and there's an us and them that's bad. So the us and them that's good is that we're distinction. There's a distinction being made. The Jews are different than other peoples because we have this ritual, right? And so therefore, we're part of the tribe, part of the family, made to be unique and special. And that has benefits because, unlike voucher marks, right? You're proud to be a member of a group that would have you, and then the other side of it is it became the sort of object of ridicule, which has really been at its foundation, perhaps some of the core of why there exists a sense of anti-Semitism, a sense of anti-Judaism in the world, because there is this sort of like separation. We have rituals that are only qualified if you are willing to participate in our drama of searching meaning or being in relationship with God. But if you don't do that, it's nice, we like you, but you're not one of us. And so therefore there was ridicule because the Greeks were like, look at us. We have these wonderful gymnasiums and we do all kinds of sports in the nude. And the Jews of the time were attracted by that. It's called assimilation. And they wanted to be a part of the excitement of the time. And they even underwent painful procedures to try and reverse the circumcisions that were given to them without their own, without their own volition, right? And by doing that, they somehow enabled them to be counted among everyone else. Well, once Antiochus comes along, it doesn't even matter. This is like what the Nazis did, right? It doesn't even matter if you're pretending to be like everybody else, because even if you're pretending to be like everybody else, you're still not one of us. You're one of them. And so therefore, and it's unfortunate, if you wanted to read the book of Maccabees, it talks about just how brutal Antiochus was and what prompted the Maccabean revolt and the holiday that we celebrate, Hanukkah, which celebrates the victory of the Maccabees over the Assyrian Greeks. Okay, any questions, comments about what we're seeing so far? All right, let's see if we can go on a little bit further. And now let's see about the history of naming for girls. I love this, and I got to tell you, I love a couple things. I'm always learning something new. Tracy, would you like to read? You have to unmute if you do.
I'm sorry, I was doing two things at once. Where are we? We're at,
History of naming girls.
got it. Okay. Abraham was now old, advanced in years, and one of the first mentions of the Holochrist, is that
Holochrist.
Holochrist, as a name-giving ceremony was in the 16th century by Rabbi Israel ben Shalom Shachna of Lublin. He describes children gathering to lift up the baby and call out his, in the original account, secular name, and adds, quote, and all this is called Holochrist, unquote.
Okay, I'll explain everything in a second. Why don't you read the last piece?
The Jewish feminist movement that began in the 1970s encouraged the development of ceremonies to publicly sanctify the entry of Jewish baby girls into the covenant. By the beginning of the 21st century, public welcomes for baby girls had become normative in American Judaism. Although ceremonies for baby girls are most often held in synagogues during services where the Torah is read, many are now conducted at home, like those that accompany circumcisions. In Israel, the ceremony or party celebrating the birth of a daughter is sometimes called brita, a feminization of the word for covenant.
Thank you very much. Okay, so you see three things. One is the bold. This is the text source that is often referred to for what constitutes the need to name our daughters or welcome them into the covenant. Now, if you look at the verse, it says nothing about daughters, not like circumcision for boys. It says Abraham was now old, advanced in years, and Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh had blessed him in all things. Okay, in all things in Hebrew is Ba-kol. Now, Ba-kol is also familiar to a Hebrew word, bat-kol. Bat-kol. Bat-kol is the voice of a daughter. Okay, that's the translation. Okay, and the voice of a daughter is this sense that, so Abraham has, he has a son, he has Ishmael, and then he has Isaac, and then he's like this happy man who's living happily ever after in the land of Canaan, but his life isn't over because he hasn't found a wife for his son yet, and it says that he's blessed in everything. Well, if he's blessed for everything, why does he need to pass on a lineage to his son? So one of the things that they interpret in this word Ba-kol is that it was a daughter. So Abraham was blessed with a daughter. And so if Abraham was blessed with a son and there was a ritual of bringing him into the covenant, there should also have been some kind of ritual to bring the daughter into a covenant. Now, if you're listening to this and you're like scratching your head, you should feel a little bit like uncomfortable because the Torah doesn't say anything explicit about naming daughters in the covenant. I'm sorry to say that, Sue, but it takes many, many centuries later before it finally develops into something of significance. And what you saw in the two quotes that I showed you is one is actually fairly old. I mean, in our history, it's fairly old. It's about 500 years old. And this Ashkenazi, so Ashkenazi is basically Eastern European custom. Holochrist comes from the words hol in Hebrew, which means secular, and Kreis, which comes from the word secular in German. And this is what Jews identified as a naming ceremony. And what they did is they would actually go and give their kids names just like the Germans were giving their kids names, but they would do it in the home in a way that was different than what was happening with the ritual of circumcision, particularly with their daughters. Why? Because the daughters were getting names and the Jews didn't have some corollary kind of ceremony, and so they began to adopt this. That evolves until the late 20th century, the 1970s, when finally the feminist movement begins to develop ceremonies that celebrate the naming of a daughter in tradition. I want to share with you one of the examples. This is what I do with my families when I want to share a ceremony with them. I just did this one last weekend, so it's nice to show it with you. All right, so what do you do, right? Because you're not going to do circumcision. So what do you do with a daughter? So if you'll see, we're not going to read the whole thing, But I want you to see everybody says welcome. You have some words. It's all in English, just so you know. And then you have what is called the talit ceremony. Now, this is also a new thing. A talit is that four-corner garment with the fringes on it. And the talit is used to wrap around the child. And these little four things are things that the parents say. They're like little prayers, right? As your eyes are filled with wonder, and then they fold one of the corners of the talit over the child. As your hand tightly grasps your parents' fingers, and they fold one of the corners, and so on through all four of them. And then you get to the naming of the child. And so here it is. If you look, I give it to you in Hebrew and in English. So this is the prayer that is recited to give the daughter a name. God of our ancestors, sustain this child and let her be known among the people of Israel as whatever. May she bring to her parents, family, and community joy and happiness in the months and years to come. As we have brought her into the covenant of Am Yisrael today, so may she enter into a study of Torah, the blessings of marriage, and the performance and commitment to good deeds. Okay, so the prayer is basically, we bless the parents and may her name be a sustaining name among the people. She has a name to be considered among the people. Then just a last little quick thing. This is a nice thing that I add to it. If you see it in the italics underneath acts of loving kindness, I do this for sons as well. Okay, by choosing to bring the child into the covenant, we ask family and friends to raise her to a life committed to doing good deeds. By doing good deeds, we help bring the broken pieces of the world together. And she's going to begin her task of repairing the world, these broken pieces, by performing her first act of chesed, her first act of charity. And what I do is I take a little tzedakah box, which is a little box with coins that you fill in it, and we pass it around to the people, and everybody puts a coin in it, and we take the little baby's fingers and we put the baby's fingers with a coin into the box. And it's so a way that like the child demonstrates that she is a part of the community. So this is just an example of how we do it with the ceremony. No circumcision, no blood, no fancy schmancy, parading the child around and all kinds of things that have evolved. It is an opportunity to wrap the child in the folds of tradition, literally the folds of a talit, because it's a ritual that demonstrates that they are a part of something bigger than themselves. So, let me pause for a second. I see a couple of things. Okay, hospital circumcision. Put what link? Tracy, which link do you need me to put in there?
One for the ritual that you just.
Oh, sure. Yeah, be my pleasure. Yeah. Oh, good. Oh, look, I'm happy to share with you. If you like it, you're more than welcome to it. This is something that I've developed over the years. Let me do this. And it's a really great thing. I've done a bunch of different ceremonies. There's a bunch of things that can happen with daughters, and you'll see that in just a moment. And any other questions?
Question.
Yes.
I know Orthodox do it on the first Shabbat, but when is it usually done, or mainstream?
For daughters?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the delightful thing about daughters. So and this is what we did for our family. We'll talk about the sort of like practice next week. I'm trying to just keep it distinct, but a quick answer is that the custom is either the first time that the Torah is being read, it's not even Shabbat. The next time that the Torah is being read is when Jews customarily, when they do it in a traditional environment, will go to the synagogue and simply they just get an honor and the name is read out loud. Okay. Everything that I've been showing you are these customs that people have been evolving for hundreds of years, right? And now, at least for us, about 50 years, which is really great. And those things can happen as typically around the 30th day, but I get a lot practically at the first birthday. Oh. I got to tell you, I've done a lot of first birthday parties, which is a whole ritual. I'm like, let's name this baby and let's make it ritual. And then here comes face painting. And here's the petting zoo. It's a crazy thing.
Is there ever too late to name a baby? Like 3 years old, 5 years old, or do you wait till their bat mitzvah? I mean,
is it too late? There's never a too late. Yeah.
And did you say they don't
exactly.
get their soul until they have their name?
Yeah, but like, I mean, that's a superstition. It's not that they don't get their soul, but I would say, first of all, we all have souls, from we have souls before we're born. You
Right.
could argue that, but the soul becomes animated upon birth. And in that animation, the sort of unique contribution that this unique individual, this unique human being will have in the world does not take form until it is given a name. Now, do you have to wait until the naming ceremony to give a name? No.
So if they have a name, but that hasn't been recognized in synagogue, does that matter?
That's a great question, but I think, I think it's a great question about all of this, because once we get to the 21st century, there's a lot of different things that happen here. So, so we actually have to have a bit of a reanimation. This is why this is what I love about what the class is that we've created together, is that we have rituals that have been transmitted throughout the generations, but these rituals in our day are transforming. Some of them are being left behind, and some of them are evolving into something new. And so what does it mean for us to make things meaningful and significant if we're not necessarily carrying forward all of the features of the old tradition? That's the work that we have in this class. And if we accomplish it, you guys are going to get your rabbinic degrees, and then you'll be wonderful. Some of you are actually literally applying for your rabbinic degrees. So I'm glad that you're taking the class. Any other comments, or everybody's doing okay? All right, let's see if we can get.
We have
Yes,
hands
please.
raised, just not officially.
Mine is
Oh.
too.
Wait, so we're okay or no?
I have a question or
Please.
comment. I wanted to say that I'm so glad that you said that it's transforming, because my son is 46, and 46 years ago, I was not, one of the things that turned me off about Judaism, that it was so specific as to what would create a ritual, and what would create a ritual that would make my son Jewish, because I knew that I was Jewish and that I had given birth to him. And so now, 46 years later, and after studying at the academy and a lot of other life experiences, I'm just so glad to see that a lot of these rituals are in transformation.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's great. So hold on to that. Thanks for the comment. And just know that that's exactly where we're headed, is that this is a very realistic approach to what it is. This class is not just simply learning about what was. This class is really learning about, what is today and what might be tomorrow. Tracy?
Is there a parallel to the first birthday, and also because we give a grave a headstone at the 1 year anniversary, at the 1 year yard site, right? So it's like that gets named after a year also, and I'm just wondering.
You mean, is there? So just clarify the question.
You did a lot of first birthday girl naming ceremonies.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So
Yes.
it's a 1 year it's the 1 year anniversary of the birth. So I'm just
right. That's a lovely addition. I think it's actually it isn't necessarily consistent with perhaps our morning practices, because that actually has a whole different sort of valence to it. But it really does have a convenience factor to it, which is not a terrible thing. The convenience is like bringing people together. But then two, it's also a sense that, being a newborn parent is physically demanding. Even if you are not the sort of partner who is undergoing labor, it's exhausting. And the idea of kind of like bringing together a moment and making it truly meaningful can be very overwhelming. So the idea that you could have a presence of mind is kind of nice. It's kind of nice. So that's all. Yep. All right, anything else? All right, let's see if we can get through a little bit more, and then we'll call today. We're going to talk about, we'll talk about upsharing, and we'll talk about the Pidyon Ben next week. So if you see it, but you're missing it, don't think that we're not going to cover it, okay? So let me just do a couple really neat things. Roberta P., you want to read?
Uh-oh.
What happened?
The screen just totally went black.
Uh-oh. I'm gonna go ahead and
Get somebody else
I'm
somehow.
gonna
I
choose
don't know
somebody
what
else.
happened. Sorry.
No problem. Jeannie, would you mind reading for us, please?
Rabbi, the font is so small that I really can't. That's why I'd like you to mail it. So I'll read next time.
Okay, good. Amanda.
Yeah, I'll try with the small font, but it's a problem.
I'm making it bigger, you guys.
Okay, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi was the editor of the Mishnah in its final form. He's referred to as Rebbe, teacher, par excellence, and as Rabbeinu HaKodesh, our holy rabbi. He was the son of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel II, and was born 80 years after the destruction of the Second Temple. At the time of his birth, a Roman edict was in place forbidding the practice of Brit Milah, circumcision. However, his mother was on good terms with the Roman governor's wife, and they agreed to perpetrate a deception upon the Roman authorities. Yehuda, who had been circumcised, was given temporarily to the wife of the governor, while the Roman child, who of course was uncircumcised, was held by the Jewish mother, completely fooling the authorities, including the governor himself. Later, when the Roman child grew up to become Marcus Aurelius, an enlightened and compassionate ruler, he and Rebbe became close friends, which rebounded maybe, to benefit the Jewish people.
Yeah. Taking it from a fancy encyclopedic.
Are you muted? No.
You're not muted. So it's a really interesting thing, right? So here's the story. Yehuda Nasi is one of the greatest rabbis of Jewish tradition. He was an incredibly prolific writer. He was an author of one of the most important books of Jewish literature. And when he was born, because he was born at a time in which the Roman authorities were forbidding ritual circumcision because they didn't want to allow Jews to distinguish themselves, there was a certain kind of like ruse that was perpetrated with the governor, who was favorable to Yehuda Nasi's mother, and basically said, we're going to switch our babies. So they didn't pay attention to the Roman child, who was uncircumcised, because they gave it to the Jewish mother so that they saw that he was uncircumcised. And then Yehuda Nasi, who was circumcised, was with the governor's family. And in that switch, a couple of really powerful things come out. One, know that the ritual of circumcision was already a contentious practice in ancient Israel. And when we come to our concept of what circumcision means today, the contentiousness may have changed. It may have transformed a little bit, but the fact that there is still a physical distinction between a Jewish and a non-Jewish person that is perpetuated by Jewish tradition could be something that is of significant concern, but also it's an opportunity to more deeply understand exactly what is the covenant that Jews are undertaking. That, and also understand that in this story, that there is compassion in the world that says that kind of distinction shouldn't be a measure of, it shouldn't be a measure of threat, or it shouldn't be a measure of oppression, because that isn't what defines the sort of like character of a person, besides the sort of health and hygienic effects. The spiritual nature of somebody that's doing something that, we can argue whether its health factors are beneficial or not, but fundamentally at its course, the concept of a circumcising ritual isn't something that is detrimental to the health and well-being of a human being, but it does create a distinction. That isn't a measure that should separate us from people who don't do it. It's a really interesting kind of like question to consider when we're moving forward. In other words, is circumcision a requirement that says that you have to do it in order to be Jewish? Or is it really that says that it is a willful act to participate in the drama that is known as Judaism? And because you are participating in that ritual, it sort of either entitles you or it obligates you to a certain kind of behavior. this is the question that we need to hold on to as we start to move into our second course. But before we sort of get to ourselves for the conclusion of the day, do we have any questions or comments or responses to that? Counter sermons, anything that you want to make sure we sort of think about today?
My hand's up
Okay.
somewhere in there. I was just going to say, as you talked about the difference, two approaches to circumcision, it feels to me like when people make a choice to wear a kippah, you know, by wearing that kippah, are you making a statement about who you are, but it's also about what happens when people look at you and the expectations that happen when they see the yidlid. Except that it's the same thing with circumcision in some ways, except that for the most part you can't see it. So what does it mean when you've got your kippah on your privates?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a comment because I think it's a good observation. And it's an important question to consider. So is this sort of a, you know, it's definitely not something that's like, you know, out there, right? Like, and by the way, like really traditional Jews, they also do other kinds of things that sort of distinguish them. Their hair, the way the hair is grown, beards, right? You know, attire. There's all kinds of things that distinguish. At the same note, there's also the other side, which is that if you look at a profile of the Jews that exist in the world today, it's not every Jewish person has a beard and black curly peyot, they call them, you know, ringlets around their hair, and that, you know, those things aren't necessarily the defining features. However, Jamie, I think we would all agree that like circumcision, and by the way, circumcision is not exclusively the domain of Jews. There's, you know, most people are getting their children circumcised today in the hospital, right? It's because it's hygienically beneficial. It's hygienically beneficial. And so since that's the case, what is the distinction if it's circumcision is not the distinction of Jewish identity? It's the same thing with the kippah, right? Because there's something sort of willful about behavior. This is behavioral, right? That's physical. And knowing that there's a behavior and a physical distinction that we're going to be sort of navigating through here in our rituals, that's what makes this class to me, I think, interesting. When do rituals become definitional, about our identity, and when are they behavior? When do they sort of like determine who we belong to, right? Let's think about it as we sort of reach our conclusion today. The people we all sort of like lament who were just sort of tragically and brutally shot down because they loved dancing. For them, it was a part of their identity, right? And this person robbed them from it. That's happening in our world today. And so the idea is it that, because if you ask those people or the people that are surrounding that, right? Like, who are you? They would say, well, I'm this and I came from this family, but this is what I do. I dance, right? And the same person would say, if they're a Jewish person, I'm this, I came from this family. And you could say I'm circumcised. I mean, that's an interesting sort of like next step, but it's almost the same thing. Is it behavioral or is it definitional? This is something that we need to hold on to.
But isn't that behavioral or definitional also determined by the group and not by the individual? What you're basically saying is who's determining this, the individual or the group?
I think it's such a wonderful question Tracy asked, right? So where's the definition from? Is it inside or is it outside? Right. And this is exactly what we have to navigate, because there's so many times, especially when it comes to Jewish identity, that it's both inside and outside. Right. And the problem with it is that we will sometimes reduce the inside and outside to like every Jew does this, or all Jews do this, both inside and outside. And it has its challenges, something that we need to pay attention to. Thank you. All right, let's see, who else has got their hand? Is Judy.
I think it's interesting, as I was taking notes from how we started the class this morning with the what of rituals, and that bris was the distinction, that it was our Jewish entry for young males into the Jewish community. And now your last statement about with so many a bris is taking place in a hospital setting to non-Jews just for hygienic purposes, what does that do to the definition that we started with this morning? Interesting.
Yeah. Thanks. Fantastic point. And with everybody's indulgence, can I hold on to it? I've got it written down, and let's pick it up, because what we're getting into in our 21st century is, if not this, then what? Right? Isn't that a great question? It's a great question. If it's not the circumcision with this whole ritual, which by the way, Jews didn't create, then what is it going to be? So thank you for adding it. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Thank you for learning with me. I'm going to make sure it's really, really good. Okay. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Be well.
you.